Welcome to the next lesson in this course, where I'm going to introduce you to the sample application that we will be building in the coming lessons and chapters. We are going to build an event management system. And when I say event in this context, I mean something like a concert, a movie show, a technical conference, or similar. Our system will consist of 4 modules: the users module, the events module, the ticketing module, and the attendance module. The application code name is Evently, so I'm adding a legal disclaimer that any similarity with an existing system with such a name is purely coincidental, and all of the features that we are building here are fictional. Here's a conceptual diagram of the 4 modules that we will have in our system with the corresponding entities inside. Inside of the users module, the core entity is going to be a user, and they will have a set of roles and permissions that we will use to implement role-based access control. Inside of the events module, we're going to define the actual events that our users can attend and buy tickets for. We will have ticket types like early bird tickets, standard, and VIP tickets. We're also going to be assigning our events to a particular category to make it easier to look for a specific type of event that you might be interested in attending. This module isn't public facing. It's going to be more of an administration console, allowing us to manage the source of truth in our system. Then we have the ticketing module, which you could say is the core module in our system that contains the largest amount of use cases and domain entities. We also have concepts like events and ticket types that we could copy from the events module, but this is an implementation detail that I'm going to discuss in depth in one of the future lessons. For now, just consider this as events and ticket types as part of the ticketing bounded context. We also have the concept of orders and order items, and a cart and cart item that actually get converted into an order once a user checks out their cart. We're also going to be recording payments, refunds, discount codes, generating tickets for particular events, and all of this is going to be done by the customers inside of this module, which map to the user's entity inside of the user's bounded context. Then we have another module called attendance, and this module is all about tracking how many customers attended a particular event, figuring out what tickets were used. Maybe some tickets were used more than once, and we could flag this because it could be interesting to some of the other modules in our system. The reason I decided to use an event management domain for the implementation is because it's complex enough that we could have some very interesting use cases that we can demonstrate on a modular monolith architecture, and yet it's also a simple domain which most of you should be familiar with in one way or another, and this is going to be helpful when we want to translate this conceptual model into our application's use cases. Here's another high-level diagram describing what our system is going to look like once we implement all of it. We're going to have one executable application, which is going to be an ASP.NET Core Web API, and it's going to contain the modules that we have identified inside of our system. The modules themselves will have a respective schema inside of a SQL database that will contain the required data for this module. Notice that each module is only talking to its own schema inside of the database, and there doesn't seem to be any communication between them. Well, this isn't really the case. I just didn't want to overwhelm you on this diagram. In the future lessons, we're going to explore some options for how our modules can communicate at runtime, and also how they can share the data inside of the database while respecting all of the module constraints that we want to enforce. When it comes to the architecture of a specific module, you should be able to treat each module as a separate application inside of the system. This means that we can use any architectural style for a specific module that we think is the best fit for the business requirements that we need to implement. So you could be using the vertical slice architecture inside of one module, the hexagonal architecture inside of another module, and the clean architecture inside of another module. To drive this point home a bit better, here are 3 modules, A, B, and C, and all of them are implemented using clean architecture. Each module contains a respective domain, application, infrastructure, and presentation component. Each module provides its own functionality through the use cases that it exposes, and it's able to provide this functionality in isolation from the other modules in the system, or with minimal communication that is required, for example, to access some required data. Another example could be using different architectural styles for each module. So in one of the modules, let's say module A, we could be using the clean architecture. In module B, we could be using a variation of the vertical slice architecture. And in module C, we could be using a traditional layered architecture with the application, business, and data layers. The implementation is mostly left up to you and your personal preferences. I'm going to show you how to implement this using vertical slice architecture, which we are going to refactor into the clean architecture later into the course. Here's the conceptual diagram again of the 4 modules that we have inside of our event management system. We have the ticketing module as the core domain, the events module as a supporting subdomain, as well as the attendance module as another supporting subdomain, and we also have the users module as a generic subdomain, which mostly deals with user identity and authorization. I'm also adding a little teaser of the technologies that we will be using to build out these modules. We're going to use Postgres as the database, Keycloak as the identity provider. We're going to use Redis for something inside of the ticketing module, and again MongoDB for something else inside of the attendance module. And this brings us to the end of this lesson, where I introduce you to the sample application that we'll be building as part of this course. In the next lesson, we're going to finally start coding, and we will be building our first module.